आज का टॉपिक है कॉन्स्ट्रेंट्स इन डीबीएमएस। मैंने प्रीवियस वीडियो में डीबीएमएस से रिलेटेड बेसिक इंट्रोडक्टरी सेशन मेंशन किया था दैट व्हाट इज डेटा, व्हाट इज डीबीएमएस, हाउ टू मेंटेन द डेटाबेस इन द फॉर्म्स ऑफ रो एंड कॉलम, व्हाट इज रो, व्हाट इज कॉलम इन टर्म्स ऑफ डीबीएमएस, व्हाट इज द टर्म यूज्ड फॉर रोज एंड कॉलम्स। तो वहां पे मैंने एक टेबल क्रिएट किया था एम्प्लॉय से रिलेटेड, जिसे मैंने दो वैल्यूज इंसर्ट किया था। अब हम लोग जैसे जानते हैं कि डेटाबेस में हमारा डेटा या टेबल्स इज द मेन थिंग, ठीक है, अबाउट विच वी हैव टू focus. So how to create a proper database? So the first thing is to focus on the constraints while preparing a database or while creating a database or while inserting the values into a database. So the question is, what is the actual meaning of constraints? Fine. Constraints means what? So point wise, I have explained it here. One by one, you can see. I'll discuss it. I'll explain it. In first point, it is written, constraints are set of rules. Set of rules means do's and don'ts while creating a database. ठीक है, जैसे हम लोग कहीं पे आप प्रोफेशनल हो, आप एक स्टूडेंट हो, तो बीइंग अ स्टूडेंट, बीइंग अ प्रोफेशनल, you have to maintain some set of rules. Fine. Some do's and don'ts that we have to follow in that particular environment. It means we are under some constraints. So in database also, constraints means the set of rules that we have to follow while creating a database, while inserting the values into a database, while updating the database. We have to maintain some rules and regulations. So that is known as constraints in terms of a database. Now, what is the use of this constraint? So in second point I have mentioned here, constraints are used in a database to maintain the quality of information, to make the database accurate and reliable. Reliable means we can use the database properly at the proper place, and it must be accurate so that we can use it for a meaningful purpose, and the data must be stored there, that must be reliable. Fine. So constraints are used in a database to maintain the quality of information. Now, constraints can be of two types. The first one is known as column level, and the second one must be table level. Now, what is the actual meaning of column level and table level? So it is explained it here. Column level. Column level constraints can be applied on a particular column. In previous video, what is the meaning of column and rows, that is explained there. Column means the attributes in terms of database, and rows means tuples in terms of database. So column level constraints can be applied on a particular column to make it more consistent, more accurate. And the second one is known as table level. So the table level constraints can be applied on the whole table to make it accurate, to make it reliable, so that the data can be fetched easily from the table. For example, this is the example of constraint. What is the example of constraint? Suppose you are maintaining a database related to anything. Now, there are so many rows and columns. Now, if you have so many columns, and if a column has not null constraints, you have set the column for not null constraint. Now, what is the meaning of not null constraint? The meaning is that particular column cannot store null value. Now, null value means, null means empty, means that particular column cannot be empty, or any single value cannot be even empty. You have to store some meaningful information in that particular column to make the table more accurate, more reliable, more meaningful, so that it can be used properly. Now, we will discuss what is the purpose of applying constraint. So the answer is, the purpose of applying constraint on the table is to maintain the data integrity during an update, insert, or delete, these kinds of operation. So whenever you are updating the database, whenever you are inserting any values, if you are deleting any type of values from the table, you have to maintain that particular constraints or that particular set of rules while doing any type of operations in the database, so that data can be meaningful. Fine. Now we will discuss that what are the types of constraints. Fine. So one by one we will see. First one is known as domain constraint. Now what is the meaning of domain? Domain means, in simple words, it is written here so that it can be understood by each and every student who is a beginner or who is learning the database for the first time. If you have learned this word domain, then obviously you will think that what is the meaning of domain. So in simple words, it is written here: domain is a set of permissible values that can be given to an attribute. For example, domain is a set of permissible values, means what is the value the database administrator can permit in that particular column to make the column meaningful. That is the actual meaning of domain. Fine. For example, if you are storing the contact number of an employee in a database related to employee table, then you can set the constraint like contact number must be of 10 digits. So if in that particular column named as contact number from the employee table, if the data, whatever the data is being entered in that particular column of contact number is less than or greater than 10 digits, then it will give you an error message. Fine. So this is the meaning of domain, that only 10 digits is the permissible values for that particular column named as contact number. Fine. So this is the actual meaning of domain. Now we will come to the next type of constraint, that is null value. Null means the problem of missing information. Null means the problem of missing information or the value which is not known or unavailable for the database. If you are maintaining any database and for any particular column the value is unavailable or that particular value is missing, then that is known as null value. Fine. Now we will come to the third point, that is primary key in constraint. This is a very important type of constraint. Now first we need to know that what is the meaning of primary key. So primary key is used for identification of tuples. In database terminology, tuples means rows. So it should be unique and not null. This is a very simple definition of primary key. That is, primary key is used for identification of tuples or rows in a table. So it should be unique and not null. Now what is the example of primary key? Suppose we are maintaining a database related to student. Fine. Students studying in a college or a school. So every student has their roll number. Fine. Now it may be that with the same name, there are more than one student in a class, fine, or in a section. But if we will assign them a particular roll number, obviously it will be unique. That roll number is obviously unique, and with the help of that particular roll number, we can identify that particular student, or we can identify the records maintained for that particular student in a class. Fine. So primary key is a very important type of key or very important constraints that is used for identification of tuples or rows or record. So it should be unique and not null. Not null meaning I have already explained you. Now what is the meaning of unique? Unique means it ensures that all the values stored in a column must be different from each other. Means no repetition will be there in a column. Fine. So that is the actual meaning of unique. Unique ensures that all the values stored in a column must be different from each other. Fine. Now, the last one is default. Default sets a default value for a column if no value is specified. Default actually sets by default by default database already sets some values if value is not specified there. So that this is the meaning of default constants. So one by one I have explained here so many terms that what is the general meaning of constraints, what is the use of constraint, what are the types of constraints, that is column level and table level here. What is the example of constraint? What is the purpose of constraint? Now, what are the different terminologies used in maintaining constraints in a database or in a table? So these are domain, null value, primary key, unique, and default. So this is all about the constraint, which is very important topic in terms of database to make the database accurate and reliable. Fine.